Okay, so let's just do a quick little recap of where we are in the class. Today, as I mentioned last week, will be a continuation of the last class. Okay, so we're going to continue working on our last couple elevations that we started last class. So if you're not yet done with those, today we're gonna finish working on those. All right, I gave you guys an extra class because I want us to be as dialed in as possible before moving on to SketchUp. Okay, so that when we start on Wednesday, that we're all caught up and we're ready to go. Okay. So a couple other important dates. You know, Thanksgiving is next week. Unfortunately, it doesn't affect our class, but reminder that our portfolio review progress is going to be next Wednesday. Okay, it's the day before the Thanksgiving break where there's no school on Thursday and on Friday. Okay, it's a fun day. Again, bring your portfolios. Please put some time and some effort into that prior to our Wednesday class so we can have a good, thorough discussion with each and every one of you. All right, if your friends aren't here in the class now, make sure to remind them over the next couple days. I'll probably bring some pizza or something like that day to entice everyone to get their pre-Thanksgiving meal on. So it's a good day though, nice easy day. Today, we're going to go ahead and do a refresher. I'm going to recap most of the lecture from last class. I'll skip some portions of it as it's a little bit repetitive. But for those of you that were not here last class, or maybe you're having trouble with using some of the tools, pay good close attention for the lecture. Should be pretty quick, as we'll just be going through the Live Paint tool and going through kind of those kind of repetitive steps that we were talking about last class. So it's a tricky tool to use, so it's important to pay attention to those steps and to make sure that we don't lose track of those. All right, any questions before we move on? Good? Okay, so again, recap of last class. I'm going to go through the process of plotting our AutoCAD floor plans, and then I'll also go through the process of using the Live Paint tool and then also establishing or using the, having a brain fart here, using our layer mask tool as well. Okay, so a little recap. So let's start with our AutoCAD file. A lot of this will be familiar from last class. If you are already successful with everything that we're doing, just keep working. Okay. Other than that, we will take a break here in about half an hour, 40 minutes or so. All right. So we're going to start with our AutoCAD file. We're going to go down to File Print. You can also just type in Plot. All right. Everyone should have the plotting down pretty well. Okay. Notice that my DVC pen setting is missing. Let's quickly go through that process of finding that pen setting. So we're going to go over to Options. All right. I'm going to go down to Printer, Support File Path, Plot Style, Table Search, and we're going to change that path. All right. I'm going to go to my thumb drive. Fall 2017, I believe my path is saved onto this folder right here. We're going to hit OK, and we're going to type in plot again. And now that should not be missing. It's still missing, of course. I think it might be on the previous folder. Let's just double check that. OK, perfect. So it's just in the wrong folder. So let's go up and change that. Options, Printer Support File Path, Plot Style, Search Path, and we'll change that to, what did I say it was? I think it's 12A. Okay, great. So now that pen style is currently working. Okay, I've already shown you guys some of the floor plans and elevations from last class. I'm not going to overwrite that because I may want to go back, but I want to reiterate a lot of what the deliverables are for this assignment. Okay, so I'll do that as we continue to work through it. All of my settings are set up adequately. Adobe PDF, ArchD, we want to plot the layout at a 1:1 scale. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and I'm going to save this to today's folder. All right, let's create a new folder for week 14B. All right, and let's save those elevations. All right, let's open this up in Acrobat, make sure it plotted correctly. Great, exactly the way I wanted it to. So now let's go ahead and open up Illustrator and let's open up that file. So I'm gonna go to File, Open, and I'm gonna select that PDF from today's folder. All right, this should have been the PDF that you guys submitted for assignment 5, okay, just to be clear. All right, so we have this right here. Right now it's currently a little bit backwards, so we can fix that by going to File, Document, Setup. Actually, before we do that, let's rotate all of these, okay? I'm gonna select all of these plans, I'm gonna rotate them 90 degrees, and then from here, I can go to File, Document, Setup, Edit Artboards, all right? And I can adjust my artboard to whatever size that I want to, okay? Like so. So for those of you that just walked in, we're doing a little bit of a recap from last class on the process of using the Live Paint tool and using layer masks in Illustrator, okay? So here we have all of our, all 4 of our elevations and our floor plan, okay? Last class we looked at our layers tab. If we don't see our layers tab, which it looks like these 2 pieces of paper, reminder that you can go up to Window and you can find any of the different tool palettes that you might be missing, okay? So if they're not here in your vertical ribbon, you can go over to Window and you can find any missing tool palette here under Window, all right? So I'm gonna click on Layer, and if we expand our layers, you'll see that we have a big giant grouping of all of the layers on the sheet. Right now, everything is grouped into basically one layer, and that's not exactly what we want. We're gonna want to go ahead and create a series of layers for each of the views that we have here on our sheet, okay? So it's really easy to do that. I'm gonna go ahead and create a new layer for each of my views. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a new layer. Let's type in floor plan, and I'm gonna do the same thing for all of my elevations. So north elevation, bear with me for a second. North elevation, east elevation, south elevation, and last but not least, west elevation. Okay? So remember that the signifier to being able to select a certain layer in your view, if you select all of the lines that you want to move to another layer, remember that this little blue dot here signifies that that's where all the objects that you have selected are currently located, okay? If I expand that layer, I can scroll down to where we have a bunch of also selected lines. Okay, you can see here that these are all of the lines that are currently selected in that group, okay? I'm gonna select the first one, I'm gonna scroll down to our very bottom, hold down Shift, and I'm gonna select that last layer, okay? What that's gonna allow me to do is move it into another layer. So I'm gonna go ahead and minimize layer 1. Notice that that little blue dot is still selected, okay? And I'm gonna click on that, and I'm gonna drag it up to my floor plan, like so, okay? That may have been a little bit different than how I showed you guys last time. There are a couple ways you could do that. You could also drag them up into the floor plan, okay? So I'll do the same process with my other elevations, all right? So I'm gonna select everything in my north elevation here, all right? Notice that it's showing that they're all in layer 1. I'm gonna go ahead and find those. Let's make this a little bit bigger so it's a little easier to see. Let's find all of those layers. So let's see, there's our first one right here. Let's go down to the bottom and hold down Shift, select my last one. And I'm gonna go back up to the very top of all of those layers. I'm gonna minimize layer 1, and I'm gonna drag from this little blue dot, I'm gonna drag it into my north elevation folder, okay? Like so. And all of those layers have now been moved into that layer. So it's a nice, quick, and easy way to do that, all right? I'm not gonna repeat the process on the remaining 3 elevations. I think everyone should be able to understand what we're doing from those couple steps, okay? So now we can move on to the live paint process. Now last class I mentioned that it's good to duplicate the layer so that should there be any mistakes, you can have something to go back to, all right? So if you select floor plan, right here, if you select the floor plan, you can go up here to this little drop-down menu and you can click on Duplicate Floor Plan. All right, so now you've just duplicated all of those layers. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hide the first one, Floor Plan, and I'm going to rename this second one Floor Plan Live Paint. All right, so now we have a duplicate of that layer should I need to go back to it, okay? Or should I make a mistake and I don't want to Control Z, 12 different steps or 20 different steps. All right, so I'm going to select everything in that floor plan, just like so. All right, so it's showing me that everything that I have selected here is in the live paint layer. I'm hiding my original floor plan, so I'm not duplicating this. All right, and I'm going to go up to Object, and I'm going to go down to Live Paint, and I'm going to click on Make. All right, and that's going to take all of the line work that we just selected. That's going to turn it into a live paint group. All right, so let's go ahead and scroll into that a little bit. And from here, I am going to find my live paint tool brush, which will allow me to start to apply some color to the different regions of this floor plan. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on what you see as the Shape Builder tool. The Shape Builder tool represents the first tool that's in this vertical toolbar. You're going to go ahead and click on it and expand it and go down to the live paint bucket. All right, right now it's saying I can't do anything because I have no fill color selected. So I'm going to hold down Shift, double click on the fill color, and I'm going to start to establish some colors for these different regions that I'm going to eventually apply a layer mask to. Okay, so if color is critical and you don't actually plan on adding a layer mask to it, you might be a little bit more selective to those colors. I'm not going to be I don't really care too much about what the color is because I'm actually going to override it with a layer mask a little bit later. Okay, the main point is that you want to have the grouping correct. Okay, so everywhere that's floor that you want to have one texture would have one color, and if you have multiple colored floors, you would start to apply other colors for those regions. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start with the poching of my walls. Okay, last class we talked about adding a poche to all your walls so that they have some pop to them. All right, so I'm going to select a nice little gray. You can either just select a color here in your picker. You could also type it in over here in your CMYK. So I could say 0, 0, 0, and if you want a 50% gray, you can just say 50 to the key. All right, K is key for CMYK. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. All right, so I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to start to select all of these different regions for my floor plan. Okay, and while I'm doing this, remember that from last class, I'm not going to go over this portion today, but remember last class that we also spent some time going through and readjusting a lot of our different line weights. So that's an option that you have today as well, is that you can select your different line weights and adjust them as needed. Oops, sorry, let me go back. Oops, so I changed my color there. All right, so changing your line weights is an option to help your floor plans and your elevations have the pop that you ultimately want. Okay, so remember that you can use the Select Same tool. It's a great tool for selecting all of a line type or a fill type that you might be using in your plan. It's a lot better to do that versus going through and trying to select a whole bunch of lines in your view and that taking like 20 minutes. Okay, so here I've selected all of my lines that I'm currently cutting through, all of my walls, all of my mullions, and that looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a new color for my flooring. I'm just going to pick an arbitrary color because I'm going to end up changing this a little bit later. Okay, so that looks good. Ideally, before going through this process, I probably should have added a line right here on my wall so that I'm not adding a fill color out on my patio. Okay, so just something to be thinking about as you guys are doing this yourselves is if you want different floorings in your various different rooms, you'll probably need to make sure, just like when you were in AutoCAD adding your hatching, you'll need to make sure that you have a line separating those different spaces so that you can distinguish them between the inside and the outside. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and say they're all the same. All right, and we'll say that this is what I want. All right, so from here, I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm done with this. All right, I could add another color. Why not? Let's just add another color to my deck. Okay. and I'll add a texture to my deck here in just a little bit. I'll pick my steps as well. Okay, so from here I'm going to go ahead and click on my selection tool, and notice that when you click on this, everything that you see here is currently still grouped together. I want to be able to manipulate this a little bit easier so that it's not inside the grouping. All right, so when I click on this, I'm going to go ahead and go up and click on expand. All right, I'm going to click on expand so that when I click on this, it has actually removed some of the internal groupings inside that live paint tool. All right, it's still all grouped for the most part, but if I double click on it, I can start to go through. Actually, let's see. Let me right click on this, and I'm going to ungroup this a few times. All right, there we go. So I've ungrouped it a couple times so that I don't quite have, sometimes you just get like 3 or 4 different groupings in there from the live paint. So if you do have that, just make sure that you take a second to ungroup all of those different objects. Okay, so now I have no groups. I can go through and I can select all of the different live paint segments that I've created. Okay, notice that they're all individual now. Oh, there's another one that you could ungroup if you want to. Ungroup. Okay, but now I can go through and I can select all of those different live paintings that I've created. Okay, so that's one way you can use the live paint tool. Okay, I'll repeat this process when I go back down here to the elevation. All right. So now let's look at how we can actually add some actual texture, some actual realistic texture to this floor plan. Okay, so right now, I have this very kind of bland color to my floor plan for my overall floor, and I want to add some actual texture. So whether it be something like concrete or wood flooring or what have you, you can very easily do that. So last class we looked at using a grunge texture. All right, so we went to Creative Commons. We found a grunge texture that would work pretty well for the flooring. Okay, so I searched the Commons, typed in or clicked on Flickr, and I typed in grunge texture. All right, and we found one that kind of resembled concrete. Okay, this one right here looks pretty good. Whatever one you choose is okay. I'm not saying that you have to do every one of these steps that I'm necessarily showing you today. I'm just trying to make sure that you have some variety in terms of how you can apply these different steps to your building. So let's go ahead and download this. Download the original size. Okay, and you should go ahead and put these into your thumb drive. Okay, last class I actually did not put these into my thumb drive, and interesting enough, and I knew this would happen, but when I opened that same file, I didn't see any of those textures on my floor plan anymore because they couldn't establish that link. So it's important to put these textures in your thumb drive. Okay, let's go ahead and do that real quick. All right, so here's that texture here. I'm going to put this in week 14B. Let's look at this in the folder. And let's put this in today's folder. Okay, so here we go. Let's put that in week 14B. Well, that should have been week 14A. Whoops, I'll fix that later. Okay, and so now I can go up to my floor plan and I'm going to select one of those colors. Okay, I'm going to select one of those colors from the floor plan. Okay, and I'm going to go up to select same fill color. Okay, and that's going to select all of the same fill colors in my view. Okay, we could have easily just selected all of those colors because we only had 4 areas that had it, but it becomes really handy when, say, you're working with like your windows and your elevation and you might have 20 of those different blocks of color, and you don't want to go through and spend time selecting each and every one of them. Okay, from here I'm going to go ahead and go up to Object, and I'm going to go ahead and form a compound path. So I'm going to go down to Object, Compound Path, and I'm going to click on Make. Okay, and now all of those colors are now in one grouping. Okay, and they're not including some of the other ones that we created from our original live paint. Okay, so key steps. So now with those objects selected, all right, I'm going to go over to my transparency toolbar. All right, and with those objects selected, I'm going to click on Make Mask. Okay, and notice that all of the blue has now turned to white. All right, that's saying that tells us that we applied or we created the mask correctly. If, for example, one of these was to remain, there's probably a grouping of some form in there that's not allowing it to properly make the compound path. So you might want to go back and just make sure that that is created correctly. All right, so from here, I'm going to go ahead and click on that mask right here. I'm going to click on that mask, and I'm going to go to File, Place. All right, File, Place, and I'm going to click on that that image map that I downloaded earlier. Okay, so here we go, File, Place, and I'm going to go ahead and place that here in my screen. I need to make this a little bit bigger. All right, I'm not too worried about the actual proportions of it, because it's kind of a texture that whatever the proportion is will all look very much the same. All right, so here we go. Now that image is placed into that image map, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and change the color of the background to a gray so that it looks a little bit more like concrete. Okay, actually, let me step back a little bit. I'm gonna make that my first step. Let me just back up a bit. Let's see. All right, so let's go ahead and use my live paint tool again, light paint bucket. Let's change this to a gray. Okay, here we go. Let's, that looks good. Is that the way that I want it to be? Okay, good. That's still a compound path. I'm gonna go ahead and say Make Mask. All right, and again, I'm gonna click on that layer mask, File, Place, click on that image that I just downloaded. Okay, there we go. Now that concrete is at least a color that's not blue concrete. Okay, so from here, I can go ahead and move this around a little bit, adjust the image in the background if needed. All right, like so. All right, and now at least when I look at that flooring, it actually has a little bit of texture to it. This actual image doesn't have a lot to it, okay? If you wanted to add something like a wood flooring texture, let's look at how we would do that, because that's a little bit different of a process, because we would need to tile the image itself so that it could be the right scale. So again, that's gonna be the concrete. That's one single image, but I'm gonna go ahead and back it up again. All right, and let's go ahead and apply a different texture. So I'm gonna go back to Creative Commons, and let's type in seamless wood flooring texture. Okay, I'm just going to try to recreate a couple different scenarios that you might face yourself in today. Okay, so here's a good one. Okay, nice dark wood. I like that. Okay, so let's select that. And it's saying that it's seamless, so that's good. That's ultimately what we want, although it's looking like it may not be seamless. Let's go ahead and just try it out. All right, so let's download that. Okay, put that in your thumb drive. All right, and then from here, with that layer mask selected, I'm gonna go ahead and go to File, Place, just like I did before. I'm gonna go to my downloads this time, even though it should be in your thumb drive. All right, go ahead and hit Place. All right, and notice that right now, that image is gigantic. Okay, so the scale of it is way off. So we want to fix that, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and scale this so that the size of the flooring is actually the size that we want it to be, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and scale it properly, all right? Oh, where'd it go? I'm going to go ahead and scale it properly right there. It may be a little hard to see on the screen. It's barely there. But that looks about the scale that I would like to use, okay? So from here, I'm gonna go ahead and copy and paste it. All right, so I'm gonna tile it, just like we did when we were learning the similar process in Photoshop. Okay, so I'm gonna tile this. Like so. Now I can select all of them. And I'm gonna tile it in the other direction. Like this. Okay, everyone see how I'm doing that?
What keystroke commands are you doing to pick it up?
This is just copy and paste. So I have all 5 of those images that I just tiled. All right, so now it's a nice, kind of soft. The scale looks good for the wood texture. Okay, so again, I'm just copying and pasting multiple of the images that I just downloaded, okay? So it won't work as one, it actually only will work as many, okay? And I'm just gonna go ahead and fill up that floor plan accordingly, okay? Something kind of like that. All right, and now if we step back from it, I go ahead and click out. If you ever get stuck in the layer mask and you can't get out of it and it's kind of acting a little funny, just click on the little thumbnail over here to the left, and that will pull you out of that layer mask, and I can now continue working on my other elevations or any of the other steps, okay? So that's a floor plan. That's just a couple of the options, okay? I can continue to add more live paints, all right? I could add some color and some texture to my deck, to my railings, to my different pieces of furniture, okay? So those are all the different options that you have, all right? So let's go ahead and go to my elevation, and let's repeat that same process, all right? So I am going to select all, actually before we do that, let's duplicate this layer, all right? So I'm missing my layers toolbar over here. Oh, it's actually right there. So let's click on that, and let's duplicate this north elevation by going up to my drop down menu, duplicate north elevation. Let's turn off one of them. All right, let's turn off one of them, and let's rename the top one north elevation live paint. Okay, and let's work off of that one. So I'm going to go ahead and select that live paint layer. All right, and I'm going to select the entire elevation. Actually, before I do that, I'm actually going to get rid of all of these lines that I actually currently have that are basically, before I had picked those, I had added those lines to signify a wood texture. Okay, I was thinking that the exterior of the building would be some kind of wood. Okay, now I don't want to be so constricted by those lines. Okay, if I left them there, it probably wouldn't matter too much, but I'm actually going to delete them so that I can add a different texture if I want to those different areas. It's also going to speed up the live paint process tremendously. So remember last class I was actually selecting all of those different areas, okay? Now it'll be a lot easier to live paint these different regions without all of these lines, okay? So that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and select all of these objects. I'm going to go up to Object, and again, Live Paint Make, okay? And then from here, I can go ahead and use my live paint bucket to fill in the different regions of my elevation. All right, so I'm going to click on live paint bucket, and I'm going to start by adding a blue for my window. All right, so let's select all of my windows. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Like so. Okay, and last class, we actually added a sky texture to those windows to allow it to have some kind of a reflection, okay? So I am going to continue adding some other color to the rest of my building here, and then I'll go through the process of adding that sky, okay? So I'm gonna add a, let's say a gray. I'm just gonna do a real light color for my main building color, okay? Let's do maybe a darker color for my trim, or my mullions. All right, let's fill in all of these. Bear with me for just a second. All right, and I'll also do the same thing to my, say, to my roof. All right, and my steps. Okay? So there's a couple other little pieces that I could also do, but I won't make you watch me to do all of them.
It, and then you said
No.
Live paint?
No, I selected the entire elevation. So everything at that point is ungrouped. Okay, so they're all individual lines. I selected the entire elevation, and then I went up to Object, and I clicked on Live Paint Make. Okay, and select the entire. Select, if it's in a group, you would just select the group and right click and click on Ungroup. Okay? So now that I've added kind of my basic blocks of color to my elevation, I can start to add the different textures. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and right click and allow myself to get out of that live paint. All right, so right now it's all still in that live paint grouping. Okay, notice that when I select it, everything is still grouped together. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click on expand to expand all of those groupings into multiple. Okay, you can also right click and click on ungroup should there be other groupings that, there we go, that are a part of that live paint group. So there's another one. I'm going to go ahead and ungroup it as well. Okay, so from here I can start to add the different layer masks. Okay, and now this time I'm going to show you a different way to also add the layer mask. Okay, I showed you the first way earlier by selecting all of the different colors. Okay, by going something like this, where I would select the this blue color. I would go up to select, same, and fill color, and then from there I would apply the compound path. Well, there's another way that we could do it as well. Okay, and both are 100% acceptable. It doesn't matter which way that you choose. Okay, so from here what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a separate layer for the different portions of my house. So I'm going to create a layer for my body color, and I'm going to create a layer for my windows. Okay, because those are going to be the main objects in my scene that I want to apply a texture to. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up my layers. Here we go. I'm going to open up that layers. Let's move this over a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and start by clicking on all of the blue fills that I've created. Okay, so I'm going to click on that blue fill and do just what I did earlier. And I'm going to go over to select, same, fill color. Okay, with all of those fill colors selected, notice that in my layering here, it shows me where they're all located. I'm going to create a separate layer, and I'm going to call that windows. Okay, or I'm going to call these north elevation windows. All right, and then I'm going to take that selection that I just did. Okay, so I'm going to take that selection, and I can do it again real quickly. So I'm going to click on select, same, fill color. Okay, and I'm going to move those over into the north elevation layer that I just created. Okay, so now that those are all on their own layer. Okay, everyone see how I did that? I selected them all here from this layer, and I dragged them up into the north elevation layer. So now I'm going to turn everything else off so that I can only see the layer that I'm currently working with. Okay, so let's go ahead and find that sky image that I want to be the reflection. Okay, so again, you can go to Creative Commons. I'm going to say sky background. And let's find a good one that we want to use as the reflection. Okay, so maybe something like this. This is nice. And I'm going to download that original. Okay, and let's put that in my thumb drive. So show in folder. And here we go. And I could put both my wood. Oops. Just scoot this over just a little bit. I can put both the wood and the sky into that week 14B folder. Okay. So now that those are both in there, I'm going to go ahead and go back, do File, Place. So remember, this is a little bit different of a process than we did last time. I'm going to click on that sky. All right. It's super mega gigantic right now. So I can go ahead and make that smaller. All right, go ahead and make it the size of which, very similar to when you did the layer mask, make it the size that you want it to be when it's going to insert itself into those windows. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say, all right, that's about the way that I want that. I can even adjust the opacity to maybe like 50% so that I can kind of get an idea of where those clouds are actually located in reference to those blue squares. All right. Okay, so that looks good. And I'm going to go ahead and minimize this again. I'm going to open up that north elevation windows that I just created. And I want to make sure that that linked file that I just placed, okay, I want to make sure that that's below all of the fill regions that I want them to be applied to. So I'm going to move this linked file, and I'm going to move it down below all of those linked regions. Okay, so now you know that they're below because all of those yellow filled areas, are now on top of that image that I just brought in. Okay, this is very critical because you have to make sure that the layering that I currently show here, so I have a new layer for the windows, then I have all of my different fill regions, and then I have that image. That's the order that they have to be in, otherwise this process won't work. Okay, so now to create that layer mask, I'm going to go ahead and select the main. I can go ahead and minimize this. I'm going to select the main layer, and up here in this little drop down menu, I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and I'm going to click on Make Clipping Mask. Okay, I'm going to click on Make Clipping Mask. Whoops, let's see, that didn't show up the way that I wanted it to. Hold on. Let's see, let me make sure that all of those are currently working. So I'm going to click on that layer, that north elevation, and I'm going to click on Make. Actually, hold on. Let's select all of these and let's make these a compound path. That's, I think, the step that I missed. So Object, Compound Path, Make. Oops. Sorry, back up. Let's select them all. Select same fill color, and let's go ahead and make that a compound path. Okay. All right, perfect. So now I have that compound path. I have the linked file below. Okay, so I'm going to select the main layer, and I'm going to go up. Okay, I'm going to select that main layer, and I'm going to go up to my little drop-down menu and click on Make Clipping Mask. Okay, and notice now that that object is now masked with inside those fill regions. Okay, so two different ways that you can make those clipping masks or those layer masks. Okay, so if I want to adjust these, I can, let's see, double click on them. If I want to adjust the opacity of these in any fashion, here I can make this a little bit fainter should it still be a little bit too much. Okay, and then I can click on the back button on that grouping, and there, now I have those clouds in those different filled regions. Okay, I can now turn back on that north elevation. Okay, and there I have all of my different groupings again. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to do this one more time for the main body color. All right, and then we'll be about time to wrap this up. All right, so I'm going to select all of these. I'm just going to move these up just a little bit. Go up. Actually, I'll do it all when I'm all done, so they all stay as a single group. So I'm going to go back to, let's select this color here. I'm going to make another layer just for my body color. All right, so I'm going to select that color. Again, select same fill color. All right, and I'm going to create a new layer. It's for north elevation body. All right, and I'm going to drag those components over into that new layer. Okay? If I expand it, I can see all of the different paths that I currently have in that. Okay? So that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and right click on that. Let's go ahead and select all the same again, same fill color. Let's make that a compound path. So compound path, make. All right, so that I only have one layer inside that north elevation body. Now this is that time when I could pick my body texture. All right, so let's say I want that to be, I don't know, let's say concrete tiling pattern. That's not what I want. Let's type in concrete tiling texture. All right, so maybe I pick something like, something like this. Here's a nice cement block. That works pretty well. It's also seamless. I can tell that these ends line up. Okay, so I'm going to download this photo just like I did last time. Okay, put that in your thumb drive. And then from here, I'm going to go ahead and file place. All right, I'm going to select that concrete, place it into my scene. Let's go ahead and make it size appropriate. Make sure the scale of those blocks is correct. And if you need to tile it, go ahead and tile it. Let's turn off those windows here just for a second. They're kind of in my way a little bit. Let's see, that's not the one that I wanted. This one right here, so let's turn that off. All right, so now I can select with my north elevation body selected. All right, these need to be a little bit smaller. Probably about like that. And now I can copy and place this and go ahead and tile it. Copy, paste. Let's tile it throughout the entire elevation. Bear with me for a second. And that looks good. Okay, so if I click on north elevation body, I should have all of those linked images, and I should have that compound object. So remember that we want the compound object to be on top of all of the images, okay, so that you can see them. All right, everyone see that? And then from here, I can go ahead and select that north elevation, the main layer, and I can go up and I can click on make clipping mask. Okay, and you can see here that now I have I have all of that texture applied to my building. All right, if I want to adjust the transparency, maybe I don't want it quite so bold, I can do that. I can select on my opacity, maybe that's like 70%. Actually, let's see. Let me just double click on some of those. Let's go back. I'll leave it like that. Okay. And then I could go ahead and turn back on my windows. Okay, you can see here that that adds some extra life to that elevation. Okay, and then you can continue on from there. So is this exactly the way that I would probably want to leave it? Probably not. There's still a few little things that I would tweak, but that gives you at least a nice rundown on those different processes. Okay, so the last thing that you're going to want to do before you turn this in is part of this exercise is going to be that you need to label each of your elevations in your floor plan. Okay, so last class I showed you how you could do that. So let's say I'm going to add a nice ground plane to this. All right, I'm going to go ahead and fill in this ground plane with, let's say, a nice dark gray. Let's see, why is that not working? Do I not have that selected? Let's see, hold on one second. Oh, because I actually applied that ground layer in the wrong elevation. Okay, so I'm gonna go back over to my north elevation here, and let's try that now. Okay, perfect. I'm gonna change the color of that ground plane, maybe to a nice dark gray. And then from here, I could add some kind of a label. You don't necessarily have to add the label in the filled region that I just created. Okay, it's up to you and how you do this, okay? But you need to label each of your elevations, add the scale that they were plotted at to, and then also add a graphic scale. If you go to the assignment 26 prompt, you'll notice that I gave you a zip file that contains a bunch of those different objects, okay? So I'm gonna call this north elevation, and I know that you can't read it right now. All right, it's probably good to actually create a layer for all of these, for all of your text as well, to keep this nice and organized, okay? So I'm going to create a new layer, add this to the top so that it's on top of everything. Let's call this text. Yeah, let's call it texty, since I can't type today. All right, and let's go ahead and create some text. I want to say north elevation. Since I can't see my text, let's go over to window. Let's turn on the, let's see, where is it? Let's see. Let's turn on, where is my type? Right there. So I'm going to click on type, and I'm going to click on character so that I could adjust my font here. Let's pick something much bigger, maybe like 48. That looks good. Let's expand the extents a little bit. I'm going to make this white. All right. Like so, and I'm going to place that right here on top of my little fill region. Okay? Any questions about that? Any questions about that process? So I'm changing the color of that a little bit so that there's actually some differentiation between my elevation and some of my different labels. So you're going to want to add the the scale. Okay, so let's change this text to black. Let's also make this a little bit smaller. So let's say that's about 24. Let's try that one more time. All right, so I'm going to say scale is equal to 1/8 of an inch is equal to 1 foot. That's still a little bit too big. Let's make it maybe about 18. Okay, that looks good. All right, let's make this a little bit smaller. And the last but not least, let's go ahead and add a graphic scale to my elevation. Okay, so I'm going to go to File, Open, or File, Place, and let's go ahead and go to that zip file that you're going to want to download from the assignment prompt. All right, so there it is, text or titles, blocks, and scales. I'm going to have to actually hold on one second. All right, come on, Illustrator. Illustrator's going to think for a second. We may not be able to do this last part. It may fail on me. Just in case it does, we're actually luckily on the very last step here. Just make sure you might have to expand that folder and then just select the appropriate scale for your drawing. Okay, so then you would place that into your drawing beneath your scale, and you would repeat that same process for the remaining elevations. Okay, I'm guessing that Illustrator is probably going to crash here in just a second, but luckily I think we got all that.